Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ.
Good evening, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining the broadcast. Here are tonight's headlines.
Super Typhoon Chanthu, or Kiko, is threatening to flood the northern provinces in the Philippines as it intensifies at sea before heading to Taiwan.
More than 200 aftershocks rattled Mexico after an overnight earthquake that left one person dead.
And a long-awaited trial opened in Paris on the Islamic State attacks that killed 130 people in November of 2015.
And North Korea put health personnel in orange hazmat suits and tractor-towed artillery on show at a parade in Pyongyang early Thursday, rather than the more usual tanks and ballistic missiles.
Super Typhoon Chanthu, or Kiko, local name Kiko, is now threatening to flood northern provinces and the Philippines as it intensifies at sea before heading to Taiwan. Tropical storm Conson earlier, or Jolina, had just hit the central province of eastern Samar as a typhoon on Monday before weakening as it passed over the archipelago, forcing around 10,000 people to flee their homes, according to the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council. One person drowned on the island province of Marinduque. Another 2 deaths reported in Masbate province were yet to be confirmed by the authorities. As of Wednesday evening, local time, Chanthu was located over the open waters of the Philippine Sea and was tracking to the west-southwest at a speed of 12 miles per hour, according to the Japanese Meteorological Agency, or JMA. Chanthu's 10-minute average sustained winds were 110 miles per hour, or 178 kilometers per hour, meaning it was the equivalent of a strong Category 3 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. Chanthu had developed a clear eye on satellite imagery on Wednesday, further indicating just how powerful the storm had become.
Meanwhile, more than 200 aftershocks rattled Mexico after an overnight earthquake that left one person dead. Now, the earthquake, which hit on Tuesday evening, shook buildings in the capital, Mexico City, several hundred kilometers away. The earthquake was felt strongly in Mexico City, sending residents and tourists spilling into the streets from homes and hotels. Flashes of light were seen in the sky above the capital during the earthquake, which hit at a time when Mexico is facing a third wave of COVID-19 infections, as well as severe flooding in some areas. Bordered by the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, Mexico is one of the most seismically active places in the world, sitting atop 5 tectonic plates, including 3 major ones. On September 19, 1985, an 8.1 magnitude quake in Mexico City killed more than 10,000 people and destroyed hundreds of buildings.
Meanwhile, soldiers and emergency workers battled Wednesday to help thousands of victims of flooding in central Mexico that led to the deaths of more than a dozen COVID-19 hospital patients. We were all caught off guard, according to Jesus Olguin, who came to inspect the damaged floods caused to his small jewelry store in Tula. Take a look.
Las llantas y ya. Listo, ahí está. Aguas con las manos. Nos agarró desprevenidos. Creemos que si hubiera habido algún momento que nos hubieran avisado de desalojar o de guardar cosas, no hubiera pasado todo esto. Mira, desgraciadamente ya está, entonces ahora pues hay que echarle ganas, ¿verdad? Como decía mi esposa, hay que ver, esperemos que el gobierno nos ayuda con algo, no sé, a ver la forma de volvernos a levantar, porque pues nosotros sí perdimos muchas cosas.
In other news, the equivalent of 2 months of rainfall in 3 hours fell on Afghan, Garon, causing flooding in parts of the city, but without causing any casualties. Now, torrential rains fell on Afghan, the equivalent of 2 months of precipitation in 3 hours, fell this Wednesday evening in this city in the southwest of France. These bad weather caused flooding in part of the prefecture of the Garon department, but without any victims. Now, the French Meteorological Services said in less than 3 hours from the beginning of the evening, an accumulation of rain of 129.6 millimeters poured over the city, that is to say, the absolute record in 24 hours. Meteo France adds that in 1 hour, 80.5 millimeters were recorded in the same station, again a new record eclipsing the previous one dating from 1990. According to a report from the prefecture, overnight from Wednesday to Thursday, the damage is material at this time and no injured or deceased person is reported.
Meanwhile, a long-awaited trial opened in Paris on the Islamic State attacks that killed 130 people. The last surviving assailant of the November 2015 attacks on Paris appeared in court on Wednesday at the start of a historic trial over the night of horror that sent shockwaves through France. The suicide bombing and gun assaults by 3 teams of jihadists on bars, restaurants, the Bataclan Concert Hall, and the National Stadium, planned in Syria and later claimed by the Islamic State group, left 130 people dead and around 350 physically injured. The biggest trial in France's modern history is expected to last 9 months. Only one of the 10 attackers survived. Salah Abdesalam, a dual French-Moroccan national, was captured in Brussels after discarding his suicide vest and fleeing the French capital in the chaotic aftermath of the bloodshed. The attack on the Bataclan, where 90 people, mostly in their 20s and 30s, were massacred as they watched a rock concert, represented the most traumatic of a string of separate attacks claimed by the Islamic State over the course of several years.
In a related news, the trial of 20 people charged over the November 13, 2015 jihadist attacks in Paris that were France's deadliest peacetime atrocity gets underway. 130 people were killed and 350 wounded when Islamist suicide bombers and gunmen attacked the Stade de France Stadium, bars and restaurants in central Paris, and the Bataclan Concert Hall. More than 5 years after the events and in the lead up to the trial, AFP spoke to survivors, first responders, and former government officials about that night. Take a look.
Ce 13 novembre 2015, c'est un soir comme tous les soirs, c'est un vendredi.
J'étais un peu stressée ce soir-là parce que le lendemain, le matin, j'avais un DS de 4 heures ou de 6 heures.
Quand j'étais dans la fosse par terre, quelque chose me venait en tête, je me rappelais tout le temps, j'ai envie de vivre, j'ai envie de vivre, j'ai envie de vivre.
Si j'avais été 50 cm plus à gauche, je ne serais pas là.
Pourquoi je suis parti travailler ce soir-là? Pourquoi je ne suis pas resté à la maison?
Le 13 novembre, c'est un changement de dimension.
Je me suis dit qu'on y était, quoi, et que la menace d'attentats terroristes de grande ampleur qu'on redoutait depuis des mois venait de se réaliser et qu'on était en plein dedans.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
Donc le 13 novembre, au soir, Je suis donc au Stade de France avec 6 collègues masculins et nous assistons au match. Voilà. Pour ma part, n'étant pas du tout fan de football, je n'avais pas l'intention de m'attarder au-delà d'un mi-temps.
À peu près, on va dire 21h, j'ai entendu une explosion. L'explosion à peu près à 100 mètres de là, c'était le restaurant Evans. Moi, je pensais que c'était un pétard. Je vois le jeune, il me regarde, normal. Juste, quand je tourne, ça explose. Quand ça explose, là, tout mon flanc gauche, c'est comme si on m'avait matraqué. 5 fois, comme on dit, 5 shots. Voilà, boum, 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 5 fois. Pour être honnête avec vous, je me suis assis, puis j'ai regardé le ciel. Pourquoi j'ai regardé le ciel? Je me suis dit, bon, je vais partir. Parce que je commençais à avoir mal à la tête, je voyais le trou dans mon bras, je retire mon blouson, je regarde le trou, la cheville, j'avais très mal. Moi, je pensais, à ce moment, j'ai dit, mon cerveau a été touché.
La deuxième détonation ne me laisse plus de doute. Nous sommes frappés par un acte terroriste, je n'en connais pas encore l'ampleur.
Le président de la République m'appelle pour me dire je suis au Stade de France, j'ai entendu à l'extérieur des explosions, est-ce qu'il serait possible de se renseigner pour savoir ce qu'il en est?
Au moment de la mi-temps, nous nous exfiltrons du Stade de France.
Ce que nous allons découvrir, c'est qu'il y a le Stade de France et une attaque qui se déroule sur de multiples points dans la capitale. Donc je ne suis pas surpris qu'il y ait des actes terroristes, je suis surpris de l'ampleur de l'attaque qui nous est portée.
Nous avions par ailleurs des informations qui émanaient de notre Direction générale de la sécurité extérieure, de la DGSI également, travaillant avec des services étrangers, notamment américains, selon lesquels un individu qui se prénommait Abdelhamid Abaoud et que nous essayions de neutraliser, pouvait être à l'origine de l'organisation d'attaques en France.
Monsieur, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? Il y a eu un attentat. Comment ça s'est passé?
On ne sait pas s'il y a des forces de l'ordre. Je vois que c'est très agité au fond de la rue. Il y a des gens au milieu du carrefour. Donc j'approche et il y a des mots-clés qui viennent très vite grâce aux gens qui sont sur les lieux. Il y a la notion de cagoule, la notion d'armes de guerre, j'entends le mot Kalachnikov. On a une 50aine de personnes qui courent dans tous les sens, qui hurlent, qui crient et avec beaucoup de victimes allongées les unes sur les autres.
Je voulais comprendre ce qui s'était passé. Et donc effectivement, j'ai entendu des gens, notamment en carillon. Je me souviendrai toujours, il y avait une dame qui était derrière le comptoir que je suis allé voir. Et donc elle m'a raconté la voiture arrêtée, le commando qui descend et puis qui rafale au fusil d'assaut. Donc effectivement avec ça, c'est important quoi, hein, en termes informatifs.
Nous déclenchons avec le Premier ministre et le ministre de l'Intérieur un certain nombre d'opérations pour retrouver les terroristes qui sont en train de commettre des massacres en plein Paris. Et donc nous organisons une double riposte, une riposte, je veux dire, sanitaire. Il faut s'occuper des blessés, faire que les hôpitaux puissent les accueillir, les sauver, et puis une riposte sécuritaire pour retrouver les terroristes et essayer de neutraliser ceux qui ont commis un certain nombre d'actes et qui peuvent être tentés de fuir.
On prend la direction de la rue de Charonne. Et en fait, on ne roule pas très longtemps, quelques minutes, et là mon directeur me rappelle en me disant « Non, tu vas au Bataclan ».
C'est dingue.
C'est un groupe que j'avais vraiment envie d'aller voir. Et comme ça m'arrivait souvent à l'époque, ça arrive moins maintenant, c'est que j'aimais bien les concerts seuls.
C'était assez cool, il y avait une très bonne ambiance. Vraiment, c'était un concert avec une très bonne ambiance avant que tout dérape. J'ai mis énormément de temps à comprendre qu'il se passait quelque chose parce que, en fait, immédiatement, il y a eu un énorme mouvement de foule où tout le monde s'est écroulé, quoi, et on s'est retrouvés par terre.
Quand je vois du monde se plier comme, on va dire, un champ de blé face à du vent, là, je me retourne et je vois deux personnes qui sont armées de Kalachnikov et qui tirent sur tout ce qui bouge, quoi. Donc, bon, voilà, je rampe un peu, tout le monde essaie de ramper, c'est le bazar, les lumières s'éteignent, j'entends quelqu'un hurler, je ne sais pas si c'est eux ou si c'est quelqu'un, un spectateur qui dit il recharge, vous avez 3 secondes. Et là, je prends mes jambes à mon cou et je cours. Je pense que je fais 3 pas pour faire 10 mètres.
En fait, le moment où un des terroristes s'est fait exploser sur la scène, je me souviens que ça a été un bruit très très fort et que j'ai ouvert les yeux et que j'ai vu... En fait, dans ma tête, je me suis dit, ah ben le canon à confetti, il a explosé quoi. Il y a plein de confettis et vraiment. Et ça a été assez dur. C'était très violent de se rendre compte a posteriori, mais des jours après, qu'il n'y a jamais eu de confetti quoi. J'ai juste vu quelqu'un juste s'exploser.
Lorsqu'on rentre, en fait, on a une vision un peu déstabilisante parce que d'abord il n'y a pas de bruit, contrairement à ce que j'ai pu entendre parfois à ce moment-là, il n'y a pas de bruit. On a découvert des centaines de personnes couchées dans la fosse.
En fait, je me souviens particulièrement d'une personne qui est probablement, je pense, décédée, hein, qui avait vraiment des râles de douleur, quoi. Entendre une respiration. Et en fait, c'est des trucs où... C'est horrible d'entendre ça, quoi. Juste quelqu'un qui est en train de mourir et de pouvoir absolument rien faire.
Au fur et à mesure qu'on avançait, on trouvait des blessés qu'il fallait faire prendre en charge. On trouvait des personnes qu'il fallait rassurer, sortir. On a ouvert des portes de toilettes dans lesquelles il y avait 5-6 personnes tassées. On a vu des gens sortir des placards électriques, des faux plafonds. Les gens s'étaient cachés partout.
Là, on était dépassés. Je savais que je devais faire des choix, à la fois sur qui faire partir en premier, avec l'aide des médecins qui étaient dans cette cour, et on n'était pas assez nombreux.
Je crois que le terrorisme a changé le pays, parce que il a accentué les risques de tension, de fracturation, et même si notre capacité de résilience a été forte, l'impact psychologique des attentats sur le pays demeure très important. Et si le pays est demeuré debout, il est debout aujourd'hui dans un contexte de tension plus importante pour 1000 raisons.
Le procès, il est fait pour que des hommes, des femmes qui ont commis des actes effroyables puissent être sanctionnés par une justice démocratique. Parce que c'est aussi ça ce que nous devons démontrer. C'est qu'ici, nous sommes en démocratie. Il y a des lois, il y a des procès, il y a des tribunaux, et la justice est rendue au nom du peuple français, avec le droit, y compris pour les terroristes, d'avoir des avocats.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. CJ and I will be back right after this break.
This portion is brought to you by North Luzon Express Terminal.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration to update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders to help you discover valuable insights. Sharpen your instincts for smart decision-making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation, social entrepreneurship, and other leading-edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
Hello, ako si Claudine at may tutuparin akong isang letter sender request ngayong Sabado sa Letters and Music 1 to 2 p.m. Dito lamang sa Net 25. See ya! I'm not the one you needed. I love you. Goodbye.
Tayong mga Filipino, likas na palabati. Sanay rin tayong makipagkamay. Pero dahil na rin sa COVID pandemic, isinusulong ang pagbati na hindi na kailangan pang makipagkamay. Ang pambansang pagbati. Ito ay ang pagdampi ng kanang palad sa gitnang bahagi ng dibdib, kasabay ng bahagyang pagyukod ng ulo o paibabang tingin, at pagsambit ng mga salitang nagpapahayag ng pagbati, paggalang o pagpupugay. Pagkatapos nito ay ang pag-angat ng ulo ng nakangiti at nakatingin sa mata ng binabati. Pambansang pagbati, pagpapakita ng paggalang, kababaang loob at pagiging sensero nating mga Filipino.
Welcome back. Two Afghan journalists are seen with ugly welts and bruises after being beaten and detained for hours by Taliban fighters for covering a protest in the Afghan capital. Take a look. Now, the pair were picked up at a demonstration on Wednesday and taken to a police station in the capital, where they say they were punched and beaten with batons, electrical cables, and whips after being accused of organizing the protest. One of the Taliban put his foot on my head, crushed my face against the concrete. They kicked me in the head. I thought they were going to kill me, according to photographer Nematullah Nakdi. Despite promises of a more inclusive regime, the Taliban have moved to snuff out mushrooming opposition against their rule. On Wednesday night, they just declared demonstrations illegal unless permission had been granted by the Justice Ministry. Nakdi and his colleague Taki Daryabi, a reporter too, who both work for Etilat Roz or Information Daily, had been assigned to cover a small protest in front of a police station in Kabul by women demanding the right to work and education. Nakdi said he was accosted by a Taliban fighter as soon as he started taking pictures.
In other news, the World Health Organization demanded the rich nations hold off giving COVID-19 booster shots until next year at the earliest. The agency's head had already called for a moratorium through this month. Speaking from the WHO's headquarters in Geneva, WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said that appeal has been ignored despite severe vaccine shortages in poorer countries. Take a look.
So today, I'm calling for an extension of the moratorium until at least the end of the year to enable every country to vaccinate at least 40% of its population. We have been calling for vaccine equity from the beginning, not after the richest countries have been taken care of. I will not stay silent when the companies and countries that control the global supply of vaccines think the world's poor should be satisfied with leftovers.
Meanwhile, the vaccine sharing facility COVAX said it should be able to provide COVID jabs to no more than 20% of people in poorer countries this year, and that's far fewer than anticipated. COVAX acknowledged that it now expects to access just 1.425 billion vaccine doses this year, far short of its goal of delivering 2 billion doses by the year end. And so far, COVAX has only distributed some 243 million vaccine doses to 139 poorer countries, according to UNICEF, which handles logistics for the vaccine sharing facility. The Serum Institute of India plant producing AstraZeneca doses was supposed to be the early backbone of COVAX's supply chain, but India restricted exports to combat its own devastating coronavirus surge. Meanwhile, the Philippines Health Ministry today just reported 22,820 coronavirus cases, and that is a new daily record. It said the total confirmed cases rose to 2.16 million, while deaths reached 34,733 after confirming 61 more fatalities. Meanwhile, in another development, some 122 children and personnel in an orphanage in Quezon City had tested positive for COVID-19, according to the local government. Most were kids under 18 years old.
In other news, New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian says people in the Australian state may enjoy a return of freedoms, including a reopening of pubs as soon as next month if the double-dose vaccination rate hits 70%, under an official roadmap to freedom released on Thursday. Take a look.
I want to stress that whilst today the New South Wales Government is outlining our plan, our roadmap for the way forward in New South Wales, that we're definitely not out of the woods. We know that case numbers are likely to peak in the next week or so, and we also know that our hospital system will be under the greatest stress in October. However, we also know that living with COVID means you have a cautious and staged reopening once you get to those high rates of vaccination in your adult population. Now, we have obviously consulted the national plan. We've also had input from our health experts and stakeholders to make sure that when we start reopening at 70% double dose, that it's done in a safe way and it's only for people who are vaccinated. So you have been warned. If you're not vaccinated, come forward and get the vaccine. Otherwise, you won't be able to participate in the many freedoms that people have at 70% vaccination. At 70% double dose, we'll have freedoms, but at any point, if there's an outbreak or a surge or an unexpected thing that arises, health at any time will give government advice to say people in a particular area, a particular town, may need to restrict their movements if they're vaccinated within their area, within their local government area, as opposed to going all over the state.
After 10 weeks of lockdown, the announcement offers more than 5 million people across Sydney a measure of hope and an incentive for vaccine laggards to get the jab. Hair salons, gyms, restaurants, and cinemas are also set to reopen, and students would return to school from October 25th. If the target is reached in October, Sydney residents would have spent up to 4 months under stay-at-home orders. The planned easing of restrictions comes despite New South Wales recording 1,405 new cases on Thursday and warnings from doctors' groups of growing pressure on hospitals.
Meanwhile, 14 people have died in a fire at a hospital treating coronavirus patients in North Macedonia, according to authorities today. Take a look. Now, the fire broke out late on Wednesday following an explosion in a COVID-19 clinic in Tetovo in the northwest of the Balkan country, according to Prime Minister Zoran Zaev, who immediately headed to the town. The fire broke out as the former Yugoslav Republic celebrated the 30th anniversary of its independence with festivities in the capital, Skopje, including a military parade. The blaze destroyed part of the modular units recently built in front of the hospital to accommodate COVID patients. North Macedonia, with a population of around 2 million, is a poor country with a rundown healthcare system. Hospitals are overwhelmed in some areas, particularly where vaccination rates are low. Now, the country has reported a rise in coronavirus infections recently, with the daily death toll reaching around 30. It has also reported more than 6,100 fatalities in total since the start of the pandemic. Now, the cause of the fire is under investigation.
To Sri Lanka now, where women are urged to delay getting pregnant after more than 40 expectant mothers died of the virus there in just 4 months. The island nation, which recorded its first maternal coronavirus death in May, is battling a spike in Delta variant infections after travel restrictions were eased for local New Year celebrations in mid-April. Chitramali Da Silva, a director of the government's Health Promotion Bureau, said about 5,500 expectant mothers had been infected. About 70% were fully vaccinated. Experts have urged pregnant women to get the jab, with Sri Lankan health officials stating the Delta variant appears to increase their risk of severe symptoms. The nation of 21 million people has been under a lightly imposed lockdown since August that the government expects to lift in mid-September. But World Health Organization experts in Sri Lanka have called for tougher restrictions until the start of October.
In other pandemic news, Singapore from next week will begin easing movement restrictions on migrant workers living in dormitories that, according to authorities today, over a year after they were implemented to curb coronavirus outbreaks. Now, the vast self-contained dormitory complexes are home to more than 200,000 foreign workers, mainly from South Asia, who work in jobs like construction and maintenance. Virus outbreaks tore through the sites in the early stages of the pandemic, shining a harsh spotlight on the prosperous city-state's treatment of the low-paid migrants. Under a pilot program to launch Monday, the Labor Ministry said up to 500 vaccinated workers will be allowed to visit selected locations for 6 hours each week, and they will need to take a virus test before the visit and 3 days afterwards, with the scheme to be evaluated after a month. The decision was taken after vaccination rates among workers living in dorms reached over 90%.
In other news, the European Medicines Agency lists the neurological disorder Guillain-Barré syndrome, which can cause temporary paralysis, as a very rare side effect of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, a causal relationship was considered at least a reasonable possibility, the EMA said in an update Wednesday, after a total of 833 cases of the syndrome had been reported worldwide by July 31st from about 592 million doses of the AstraZeneca Vaxzevria shot administered. Guillain-Barré syndrome is a nerve inflammation that may cause temporary paralysis and difficulty breathing. In the United States, the very rare syndrome affects an estimated 3,000 to 6,000 people each year, and most go on to recover. The European drug regulator had in July listed Guillain-Barré syndrome, again as a very rare side effect of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which uses the same adenovirus technology as the AstraZeneca jab. Both regulators stressed that the vaccine's benefits outweigh the potential risks. Eagle News will be back with more stories. Please don't go away.
Sarap ng umaga, makakasama. Iba't ibang sakuna at kalamidad ang nararanasan ng bansa. Kapag may banta ng panganib, kailangang maging alerto at kung kailangang lumikas ay magtungo sa ligtas na lugar. Bilang paghahanda sa mga ganitong pagkakataon, mahalaga na may gobag na dadalhin ang pamilya. Narito ang dapat na nilalaman ng gobag ng isang pamilyang handa. Mahalagang dokumento sa selyadong lalagyan, flashlight, kandila, posporo at silbato, radyo na may bago at ekstrang baterya, first aid kit kasama ang panlunas sa lagnat, LBM, sugat at iba pa. Ang mga gamot na regular na iniinom ng pamilya. Magagamit para sa mga sanggol, bata, matatanda at may kapansanan, pera at mga barya. Pagkain na madaling ihanda, di na kailangang lutuin at sapat para sa 3 araw. Inuming tubig sa saradong lalagyan at sapat para sa 3 araw. Telepono, power bank at charger. Lubid, lumang dyaryo, matitibay na lalagyan, damit, kapote, bota at mga sanitary supplies, sleeping bag o banig at mga kumot. Suriin ang mga laman ng gobag kada 3 buwan at palitan ang mga laman nito na malapit ng masira. Ilagay ang gobag sa lugar na madali itong makita at makuha sa oras ng sakuna.
Ngayong may pandemya, marami ang walang trabaho at mataas ang presyo ng bilihin. Isa sa nakikitang solusyon para makaiwas sa pagkagutom ay ang pagtatanim. May ilan, problemado sa espasyo dahil maliit ang kanilang lugar. Pero may sagot riyan para makapagtanim, ang hydroponics. Sa hydroponics, hindi ginagamitan ng lupa ang pinagtataniman, kundi tubig at nutrient solution lamang. Sa hydroponics, makakapagtanim ka ng gulay at kahit anong halaman. Masusolusyonan ang problema sa kagutuman at matutugunan ang seguridad sa pagkain.
Welcome back. Finance ministers from the world's 7 wealthiest nations are set to meet later this week to discuss the global tax reform. Arian Celestino from our UK Bureau reports.
Hi, here is my update in the United Kingdom. Finance ministers from the world's 7 wealthiest nations are set to meet later this week to discuss global tax reform, according to the UK Treasury on Tuesday. At the meeting to be held online on Thursday, the so-called Group of 7, or G7, will try to make progress on technical negotiations on global tax reform, a Treasury source said. In June, G7 finance ministers agreed a historic commitment to impose a global minimum tax of 50% on large corporations such as tech giants in every country they operate in. The landmark deal is supposed to help put an end to top multinationals shopping for countries with low corporate taxes in which to book their profits instead of paying where they conduct their business. Some nations are opposed to the plan, most notably Ireland, which has lured the likes of Apple and Google with a tax rate of 12.5%. G20 finance ministers have backed the deal, and final agreement is expected in the run-up to the G20 Leaders Summit in Rome in October, with hopes the reforms can be in place by 2023. That's all from me. Back to you in the studio. Reporting from the United Kingdom, I am Arian Celestino. We'll live in interesting times.
Thank you, Arian, for your report. And now in other news, North Korea put health personnel in orange hazmat suits and tractor-towed artillery on show at a parade in Pyongyang early Thursday, rather than the more usual tanks and ballistic missiles to mark the 73rd anniversary of the founding of North Korea. No ballistic missiles were seen or mentioned in reports, and Kim did not deliver any speech, unlike last October when he boasted of the country's nuclear capabilities and showcased previously unseen continental ballistic missiles during a pre-dawn military parade. The Rodong Sinmun newspaper published a photo of Kim wearing a green suit, waving from a balcony towards the assembled troops and spectators. North Korea often celebrates major state anniversaries by displaying thousands of goose-stepping troops and its most advanced military hardware in parades at Kim Il-sung Square, named after Kim's founding grandfather. North Korea is under a self-imposed COVID-19 blockade, having closed its borders to protect against the coronavirus that first emerged in neighboring China, adding to the pressure on its moribund economy. Nuclear talks with the United States have been at a standstill since the collapse of a 2019 summit in Hanoi between Kim and then-President Donald Trump over sanctions relief and what North Korea would be willing to give up in return. Biden's North Korea envoy, Sung Kim, has repeatedly expressed his willingness to meet his Pyongyang counterpart anywhere at any time. But the impoverished North has never shown any indication it would be willing to surrender its nuclear arsenal and has rebuffed South Korean efforts to revive dialogue.
이른 세돌 경축 민간 및 안전무력 열병 행진이 시작됐습니다. 지금 열병 총대의 맨 선두에서 평양 총대가 나갑니다. 군균 수색 총대가 광장을 통과하고 있습니다. 공화국 무력 총사령관 동지의 사열을 받으며 수도 평양의 김일성 광장을 행진하는 혁명의 총대를 틀어쥐고 열병대오에 서 있습니다. 붉은 방패, 붉은 맹수가 되어 수령 보위, 제도 보위, 인민 보위의 사명을 다해가고 있는 혁명의 보위자, 개국투쟁의 전처병들, 사비안전군 종대 뜻깊은 공화국 창건자를 맞으며 봄결에도 그리던 공화국 무력 총성대 정대입니다. 듬직하게 지켜가는 노농초기군 대원들이 위험차게 나아갑니다.
Those military marches never fail to amaze me. I find them so
I know. And this time they're wearing hazmat suits, no missiles. A few weaponry, yeah. I thought that was cute. And did you see North Korean leader Kim? He lost a lot of weight.
I know. He actually looks so much better now.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. The news continues tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Ang in the Sand. We live
in interesting
times.
It's time to take one step further. and face the impossible. Time to search the unknown and fight for the truth. Time to overcome boundaries and connect the world. It's time for DW News.
Everyone that is working on the front lines as we battle this virus, thank you. Thank you for risking your health to make sure we are safe. You went to work for us, we'll stay home for you.
Thank you to those in the medical field, the shipping industry, sanitation and waste management workers, and other essential workers and first responders. You sacrificed your well-being for us, and for that, we are extremely grateful. You went to work for us. We will stay home for you.
To all the frontliners out there, we will never know how you're feeling as individuals as you risk your lives on a daily. But do know that we appreciate y'all's sacrifices. Let's hope and pray together that this pandemic will be over sooner than later so that we can all be back to normalcy. You went to work for us. We will stay home for you.
Hello, my name is Aaron Abin, and I'm a resident of Gaithersburg, Maryland. And this is just a quick greeting to all of the first responders out there who are helping out with this COVID-19 pandemic. So I know that a lot of you guys are spending lots of time away from your families, risking your own health, and spending lots of effort in order to assist those who are being affected by this pandemic. And I'd like to thank you for all this effort that you're putting in. And even though a lot of us are currently off work, or in my case, off school, you guys are still working hard. Thank you for going to work for us, and because of that, we'll stay home for you.
To all our frontliners in this pandemic, we would like to thank you all for your hard work. We know it's not easy, yet you show up every day to help save lives. Thank you all so much. You went to work for us. We will stay home for you.
Hi, I'm Jane Kathleen Gregorio from Corpus Christi, Texas. And to all of our first responders, whether you're there saving lives or keeping the world running, or even just helping at the grocery checkout stand, in whatever capacity that you help, we appreciate everything that you're doing, because every single day you are stepping out the door, you're putting yourself at risk for the purpose of helping your community and even your nation. And so while you go to work, we'll stay home for you. We'll be right here waiting for you.
This is a message from our family to all the frontliners that are there facing the COVID-19 pandemic, all the doctors, nurses, and EMTs that are working so hard and fighting for us. We just want to say from our family, thank you. And we hope that you stay safe and that every single shift you're able to go back home safely to your families. That's why we want to do our part, which is a small part. But we want to tell you this. We promise that
you go to work for us, and we will stay home for you.
Hi, we just want to take a moment to thank all the frontliners out there, the medical workers, doctors, nurses, police officers, any of the essential employees out there.
We thank you for continuing to do the work that you do, and because of you, we are safe and hopeful.
You are all so brave, and we really appreciate the work that you guys are doing.
And because you went to work for us, we will stay home for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Social and physical distancing, along with self-isolation when needed, are crucial to lessen the spread of the COVID-19 virus. That's what the experts are saying. That's what the local governments are saying. So let's listen to them. Let's listen to all the frontliners who tell us to stay home as they continue to go to work and face exposure. There's only so many of them. So let's stand united with and not against them in fighting the real enemy. From Eagle Broadcasting Corporation, we extend our most sincerest thanks to all of the frontliners around the world for your sacrifice and hard work. Continue to go to work for us, and we will continue to stay home for you.
Tropical cyclone o bagyo Ang bagyo ay isang uri ng lagay na panahon na nagdudulot ng malalakas at mabibilis na hangin at pag-ulan na maaaring maging sanhi ng matitinding pagbaha, daluyong ng dagat at pag-uho ng lupa. Narito ang mga dapat gawin bago dumating ang bagyo. Una, alamin ang balita ukol sa panahon at mga anunsyong pangkaligtasan. Alamin ang plano ng komunidad sa pagbibigay babala at paglikas. Suriin ang bahay at kumpunihin ang mga mahina at sirang bahagi. Ihanda ang gobag na naglalaman ng mga pangangailangan ng pamilya. Ilikas ang mga alagang hayop sa ligtas na lugar. Kapag inabisuhan ang kinauukulan, mabilis na lumikas sa itinakdang evacuation center. Narito naman ang mga dapat gawin habang may bagyo. Una, maging mahinahon. Manatili sa loob ng bahay o evacuation center at makinig sa pinakabagong balita at taya ng panahon. Patayin ang main switch ng kuryente at valve ng tubig. Gumamit ng flashlight o emergency lamp. Maging maingat sa paggamit ng kandila o gasera. Umiwas sa mga salaming bintana. Ito naman ang dapat gawin pagkatapos ng bagyo. Hintayin ang abiso ng kinauukulan na ligtas ng bumalik sa tahanan. Umiwas sa mga natumbang puno, nasirang gusali at linya ng kuryente. Huwag gumala upang hindi maabala ang mga emergency services. Siguraduhing walang basa o nakababad na outlet o kagamitan bago buksan ang linya ng kuryente. Itapon ang mga naipong tubig sa lata, paso at gulong upang hindi pamahayan ng lamok.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization, startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business.
Your weekly dose of entrepreneur